It's 2002, and a small but determined group of developers released their own swing into the world of immersive sims. Arx Fatalis, an ambitious game inspired by the works of Looking Glass studio titles like Thief and System Shock, was released into the world to be enjoyed by fantasy lovers and immersive sim players alike. The game, while being received well critically, although didn't perform quite as well as the fresh-faced developers at Arcane would have liked, still managed to garner quite the cult following over the years, in part due to its brilliant atmosphere, unique spellcasting system, and player freedom. A game where you can kill pretty much anyone is a bold move on the part of the developer, yet it gives a sense of freedom to the player which is rarely seen in games nowadays. In a world with games featuring essential non-killable characters, Arx Fatalis delivers a sense of respect to the player, giving them the option to create drastic shifts in the game or even outright breaking it. Player freedom is something which Arcane clearly holds dear to them as part of the playing experience, as it's something which follows them throughout the vast majority of their subsequent releases. Four years later sees the release of Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, an early example of the potential Arcane had when it came to creating unique combat sandboxes. The game was a little bit more linear than the immersive sim inspired Arx, but more than made up for it with the pure combat satisfaction. The combat in Dark Messiah is about using your creativity to give you an upper hand against your opponents. You're equipped with a sword and a bow, but the game really shines when the physics objects and spells are thrown into the mix. Even the tutorial emphasizes creative thinking during combat. The best and most simple way to describe Dark Messiah's combat is fun. That is, once again, something Arcane took to heart, would further master, and then implement into their following games. Entering the 2010s, Arcane was financially struggling and finding it difficult to acquire funding to work on the games they wanted to. They had some brilliant and exciting ideas in the works the years prior, like an expansion for Half-Life 2 named Return to Ravenholm, which would see the player explore one of Half-Life 2's most interesting and unique settings. An ambitious first-person shooter named The Crossing, which aimed to create a fusion of online multiplayer and single-player, and perhaps one of the most interesting projects, LMNO, an ambitious-looking parkour-based game where the player is travelling across the United States with an alien-looking creature named Eve. Interestingly, it's most notably known due to Steven Spielberg's involvement with it. After struggling with costs for a while, Arcane were approached by Bethesda Softworks and contracted to work on a stealth game with the initial idea of it being set in medieval Japan. After only a few months of development on the game, they would be fully acquired by ZeniMax Media, Bethesda's parent company.
And 2008 was like the worst for many independent developers. A lot of cancelled games. We were working on LMNO with EA. We were trying to sell The Crossing. We actually were negotiating with the publisher on The Crossing. And then we're helping a few other companies on a variety of things, but it was like truly just like mostly surviving at this point. Like Arcane had, we had done Arx Fatalis, Dark Messiah, so we were like a very one project team, and then The Crossing was going to be our next one, since we were not so much into doing sequels. And then 2008 hit us, and so that's pretty much we were in the middle of all that.
Funding was no longer an issue for Arcane, and they had the creative and financial freedom to create their next big project. Taking what they had learned from Arx Fatalis with the freedom bestowed upon the character, and the fun yet satisfying combat of Dark Messiah, Arcane were on track to create something quite magnificent.
Would you like me in white or black? Or red, perhaps?
Let me think about this. Waverly did always like black.
The way Bethesda contacted us is that we talked to GameIndustry.biz back when everything was really at the lowest point. We truly thought we're gonna close the company.
Right.
So we did a short interview. I think GameIndustry.biz was interested back then in talking to developers that were struggling because of the crisis, and we were there. So we just gave up on the crossing. Elemento had just been canceled as well, so it was just a situation where we're like, guys, here's the situation. We have, I think back then we had 50, 60 people, and so I guess it's the end. And that's when Bethesda called us because they actually wanted to do a game that was right up our alley. Because the guy who contacted us, Todd Vaughn, became a friend, but back then he was a fan of our previous games. So he saw an opportunity there.
Clearly, the Dishonored we all know and love today isn't set in feudal Japan, as the team scrapped that idea before even starting it, due to no one on the team really knowing that much about it and having little interest in the setting. Instead, shifting their ideas towards the city of Dunwall, after first trying their hand at a London setting based in the year 1666, but quickly realised they'd be much better off suited to a fictional 19th/20th century city, with the inclusion of electrified fences, floodlights, and other 20th century inspired gadgets. This was then how the Dishonored we're all familiar with now was born. Yeah, there was a feudal Japan setting at one point, wasn't there, if I'm right?
No, there was no feudal Japan. It was like the thing that was on paper at Bethesda. They had a concept for wanting a game like that, called Dishonored. That was Japan, and but we never even started. When we started conversations, we just thought, we don't know much about Japan, and specifically that period of time, we did not have much interest for it, ninjas and stuff like that. So from the get-go, we said, like, look, we keep the name, the genre we do. Apparently, you and I love the same genre. You and us, sorry. Harvey was with me, obviously, in those conversations, and that's it. And so we started directly in London.
Dishonored would be in good hands, as Arcane's founder Raphael Colantonio and Deus Ex developer Harvey Smith would be the game's creative directors. Between them both, they'd had quite the collective experience with working on immersive sims and creative combat sandboxes, as well as the visual designer being Viktor Antonov, the designer of Half-Life 2's City 17. It would seem Dishonored had quite the dream team spearheading its development. Set in a plague-ridden industrial city, Corvo Atano, the main protagonist and bodyguard to the Empress, is framed for her murder, and must spend the rest of the game brutally murdering or silently maneuvering himself through the world in the effort to save Emily, the kidnapped daughter of the Empress. And he must clear his name by taking certain targets out of the picture.
Wait! Let's play hide and seek first. I'll cover my eyes and you hide.
So what was the process like at Arcane for creating the story for the world? Had it always been like a tale of redemption, or was it something that, like the gameplay and all that, just constantly was changing and improving and moving?
I think we have a mix of there's a big picture, like some sort of a vengeance, some sort of something we want, right? Like there's going to be a twist, there's going to be betrayal, there's going to be what is the player motif from the get-go? Is it revenge? Is it saving his wife? Is it finding his daughter? Is it, what is it? You know, and it's probably starts the same in any of the games that we've worked on anyway. But the process is really, because at the end of the day, the big picture story is pretty much an excuse to pull the player into missions. You know, first you got to play in the castle, and then you're going to play there, and then you're going to play there. So I think, and also to do fun things. So that's actually really where we start. I mean, once we have an overall idea of the context, okay, it's London-inspired thing with gadgets, etc. You're an assassin. We know that. You know, you're an assassin. We know you want to be part of some sort of a conspiracy that is trying to do a coup, and then there's going to be a big change at the end or something. Sounds fine. Let's keep that in mind. But that's really the big picture. So then you go to the moment, not moment to moment, but almost like mission to mission kind of thing. Like we need fun stuff to do. We need cool places to explore. So that's a process where we drop the story for a minute, and we look at what would be cool to explore. So someone would say, an abbey would be great. Yeah, cool, old abbey, etc. Yeah, okay. Would be nice to have like a party. Yeah, there's a party at some point, and you need to do something. We don't know what yet, but you need to do something, etc., etc. So that you come up with maybe 20, 30 locations that are actually exciting to the artists and to the architects and to the level designers. Like, oh yeah, it'd be great, like some game around a bridge or something. That sounds fantastic. And then you come up with mission goals. One is, we should just have a poisoning thing. It's like, yeah, that's cool, poisoning. So it's more about trading some glasses of wine around or something. Yeah, also maybe you should have something where you don't know who's the target. Oh yeah, we don't know who's the target. So yeah, there's some sort of investigation because, etc., etc. And then you map the most interesting of all the missions together with the most interesting of all of the location, and then you try to match a location with a mission context, and that's how you end up with Lady Boyle, where okay, it's a party, aristocracy, you got to infiltrate it, but they all have masks, so you need to find who it is, etc. At this point, you still don't quite know how it fits in the story, and then once you have all that, you actually fit it in the story somehow. So now you work together a story with that. Like, how can it make sense that we go to a party? Well, it's because actually Lady Boyle has, this information about this that once you know, then you can know who your next target is or something. And it kind of makes sense, it kind of works. And then on top of that, you have another layer, which is you want to constantly seed some questions, plant some questions in the mind of the player as they play, like during those big arcs. There's like a deeper thing that either is through notes in the lore or conversation between people that refer to something that happened before, that will happen next, or that won't happen at all, but it's part of the world, so that you understand more like the definition of this world. So it's a very iterative, very long and complex process of what is the amount of exposition to player, what is the thing that is more of a background layer for people who really like to explore. Is it overwhelming? Is it not? Etc., etc. And then you figure out like some little consequences to things you've done before, so that you always remind the player that their actions actually matter. That's how if you did this or that thing, then 3 levels later you have a painting of something that is there, and it's kind of cool. Even in the very beginning of the game, for example, if you break the glass of wine before the painting of the captain of the guards there is made, then he won't appear. He will appear without his glass on the painting. Right? It's a little detail, but it's kind of like the fun thing that one person out of a 10 or 10 or 100 will realize, and it will make their day.
Dishonored took the idea of creating an epic power fantasy and cranked the dial up to 11. With the team's previous experiences, they managed to create one of the most fluid and satisfying stealth combat games to ever hit the market. And in 2012, that was a massive breath of fresh air. Each area would be expertly crafted to account for all the possible playstyles, with multiple different routes and techniques available to complete each objective, with a bundle of supernatural abilities thrown into the mix. Helps create a sense of freedom which was lacking in that era of video games. What made Dishonored unique in 2012 was the ability to harken back to a bygone era of video games, when the immersive sim genre stood tall, taking what games like Thief and Deus Ex had done over the 10 years prior and reimagining it for modern audiences. Helped to create an experience that you'd be hard-fetched to find anywhere else in the market at the time. So what were some of the main inspirations behind the actual setting of Dishonored, whether that's big inspirations or smaller ones which people haven't really noticed or don't really get talked about that much?
We were thinking, like, what is a context that we're actually excited about? And something about old Europe was exciting to us. We were fans of Thief, so having a dark, not darker because Thief is dark enough, but a more grounded version, almost like a dirtier version, set in a historical London, where we would kind of take a mystery and drill on it and bring our own angle on it, etc. That was something that sounded compelling at first, anyway. And that was really the main thing. It was Thief with more of an aggressive, more of a agile ninja kind of character in a grounded, dirty, scary old Europe that we decided was going to be in London at the time of plague and great fires. That's where it started, and then we evolved, and as we were making that game, the story was a little too obscure. Everything was too subdued. Having just arrows and knives and swords was not enough to get the fun of the gameplay going, and we started to wanting to add some more wacky stuff, and that meant some sort of an energy, some sort of gadgetry, some sort of like camera systems, security systems, anything that would really allow us to, and of course dark magic. Even though from the get-go we wanted dark magic, but it was going to be very subtle, secretive almost, like if it could actually exist in the world, but nobody knows about it except the users. And that became too subtle.
When it came to creating as much detail as possible in the game, they didn't just rely on the beautifully crafted world and the art style. Arcane took it one step ahead and even looked into details like the correct anatomy and morphology of characters' faces, so in turn they'd be accurate to Great Britain in the 19th and 20th century. They achieved this by using the work of Charles Darner Gibson and mugshots of Edwardian London and Australia. They even had an anatomy expert on board to ensure it would be as close as possible. Arcane were not only just dedicated to creating a world so precisely crafted that you could play it countless times and still have a different experience each playthrough, they also wanted it to feel as believable as possible. For the art style of the game, like we were talking about the very distinct features that some of the characters have, had that been something that was there from the beginning, or was it a fairly late entry into the series?
So we were just out of doing the crossing where we developed a lot of skill. We had put in place the structure of the art team that was able to deliver those really amazing type of environments. And we had worked with Victor Antonov, who came from Valve. Back in the days, making environments that were both fun and visually impressive was some sort of a mystery for most people, specifically people that work in first-person environments. So we were one of those confused developers, and luck, or mix of luck and who made us work with Victor for a while and change the entire structure of the company as far as the art goes. And Sébastien Mitton, who is still the art director in Lyon, became very, very strong. I mean, he was already a very talented art director with a lot of vision and passion for, again, things that are grounded and he doesn't like magic too much. He doesn't like crazy things. He like really like dirty, grounded stuff, with strong imagery, shocking stuff, but also with cohesion, with a very cohesive world. And so him and Victor were really they hit it on. Like they really worked well together. Eventually, Victor was not in the picture anymore, but all that all that Sébastien learned plus his own talent, that's how Dishonored became what it became. Also with, of course, participation of Harvey and I and some other people, because the world definition is a mix between storytelling and visual art, visual direction. So how did the energy came to be in our world was a conversation between all of us. It was not just the art, for example. As far as the style itself, we all liked, and Sébastien pushed for that painterly, kind of like simplified almost, even though it's not simple at all to make, but it looks simplified because it doesn't burn your eyes, like it doesn't. That's a very soft kind of visual, which we all liked. Those punchy colors. It brings a lot of there were contrast and clarity in the image without having all the noise that you usually have in ultra realistic treatment. So that was the style. And again, if you look at the image, it's not just the style, it's also the architecture and the shapes that they decided to go for, which are all realistic. Like the architecture was designed in a way where that city could actually exist. And so they went to London, not only London, also Edinburgh, took a lot of pictures, details, big pictures, everything, and they recreated some sort of a London, some sort of a England-inspired city anyway, of course, strong inspiration from London, without being London, and then they pushed it in time for with anachronism about the technology. So you had this mix of architecture that is recognizable from England, but at the same time some like metallic structure and stuff that is more like another layer. And that is not style, it's just design. And the style is really more about the lighting, the textures that they went for, like those simplified textures, the painterly kind of textures. And then there were the style as well. There was style in the characters, obviously. Very strong features for the faces, big hands, whatever else. Sébastien would be much better than me at describing all that. But that's even the faces. That's how they did it. They went there, they took a lot of pictures of people.
Yeah.
In Europe, people are still. They've been living in their own country for a long time compared to America. America, people are all mixed, right? So now it's like hard to tell. Oh, you come from Texas. In Europe, you can pretty much tell who comes from where. I'm half Italian. People even know when they meet me where in Italy. They will say, "Oh, I'm from the area of Frosinone," which is like mind blowing to most people. Like, really, we all look the same there. So. And so it's the same for it's the same for British people. There are some strong features where you can tell. I think this guy is British. So it was interesting to see even like the aristocrats, the features of the aristocrats, who have been in the same cast for centuries. Yeah. So there's a reason why they kind of like have very recognizable features. Workers, etc. So it is cliche. It sounds scary. It's like, really, we are so identifiable. But at the end, if you look at the game, you can tell this guy is an aristocrat. This guy is because it's all taken from actually real people.
While Dishonored isn't necessarily the longest game, it's a game that you can take at your own pace. Feel like exploring every possible nook and cranny? Discovering things hidden far out of reach? How about sprinting towards the end and using your abilities to maximize your traversal speed, assassinating your targets and then leaving? Frankly, it's up to the player for them to decide what type of experience they're going to have playing it. Prefer to play it like it's a spiritual successor to Thief, sneaking around undetected, knocking guards unconscious, ransacking every hiding spot down to the last piece of gold, and leaving without anyone ever knowing you were there. Or how about opting to use your pistol, grenades and spring razor, leaving a mess of bodies lingering behind you as you make your way towards your objective. Each of those playstyles are perfectly viable, and that's just 2 examples. And the cherry on top is that you can intermingle them however you want. You're not just stuck to one specific playstyle as you traverse the game. It's down to the player to control how Corvo makes his way through it.
Arcane was set up from the get-go to make the same games. If you look at from Arx Fatalis to so far Prey, and what I assume to some degree what it will come next, the spirit has never really changed. It was always first person, it was always a lot of emergent situations, a lot of a design of a cohesive world that is interesting to explore, that exists without the player, etc., etc. Decisions and choices, and always some degree of stealth, and of course some physicality in the player movement and the combat and all that. That's always been true for us. So all the games that we did before, of course, they were a lead up to that. They were our experience, so we refine a craft that we know how to make.
Playing as the titular Uber assassin Corvo, you get a handful of different supernatural abilities at your disposal. Abilities that would drastically mix up the playstyle, and you're free to pick and choose from the pool as you please. Arcane had took what they had previously learned from Dark Messiah's fun combat and magic system, and refined it into something much more versatile. Experimentation is encouraged, as any different scenario could easily play out a handful of different ways. Possess a rat or a fish to enter a desired location through a tiny hole undetected. Barge your way in there, guns and grenades at the ready. Or how about sticking to the shadows and pouncing on unsuspecting enemies and dragging their corpses out of sight until there's no one left.
We started wanting to add some more wacky stuff, and that meant some sort of an energy, some sort of gadgetry, some sort of like camera systems, security systems, anything that would really allow us to, and of course, dark magic. Even though from the get-go we wanted dark magic, but it was going to be very subtle, secretive almost, like if it could actually exist in the world, but nobody knows about it except the users. And that became it was too subtle. We would have powers such as dousing a torch from a distance if you focus for 20 seconds, so that would be cool in a movie, I think, because that's the kind of flavor that both Harvey and I had. We like subtle things, that's I guess that's why he and I liked Game of Thrones so much. It's the magic in Game of Thrones. It's almost like, is it magic or is it just it's not quite there. It's like sorcery, or it's very subtle. And whenever you see something happen, it's amazing. And so we were really starting with that. And in a game, unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. We just dropped it and went, well, we need to do crazy things like teleport around, become invisible, stop time, do crazy stuff.
Raphael, one of the creative directors behind the game, had this to say in an editorial interview from the Penny Arcade report about how players would experiment with the abilities, mixing and matching combinations even the developers didn't think of.
One interesting exploit happened when people would take the first 2 levels of agility, and then would take 2 levels of the blink ability, which allows for teleportation. They could then take a running leap off the roof of a building, jump, then teleport further than the team had designed for. The important detail is that the exploit was kept in. You can still take those combinations of abilities and become incredibly nimble, but a few things had to be moved so the game didn't become ultra easy.
That seems like his love of immersive sims seeping through the seams. A lot of the times in those games, you could often or not achieve things which the developers might not have explicitly accounted for. But completing the objective is still completing the objective. So if the player can find a more creative way of achieving that, then more power to them.
We don't care about the breaking part because it's the collaboration between informed developers that come from a different discipline. So yeah, there's going to be the architect. The architect knows what we're trying to do, but they have their own talent about it and their own passion about architecture. But they know that we want clarity. They know that we want some sort of an interesting vertical circulation in the map. We know multiple entrance to things. So they first do a draft where, it's pleasing to the eye, but it's also interesting to explore. We initially put in place some heights, like we always know that, a door is 2 meters or whatever it is. And so they work with those constraints, and then they deliver an environment in accordance as well with the level designers, who has, they are going to have their own also passion for a variety of things. And they might think, the door there is annoying. We can't, because it goes too quick to the kitchen. I would rather do a gameplay. How about you move the door and put it like in the back instead? As long as it makes sense for the architecture, we don't want to do crazy things, etc., etc., etc. So that's really how it comes together. And then the things that we don't know yet when we're at that phase is that 3 months from now, some system designer is gonna come up with this crazy tool that like a grappling hook or something that makes you fly, and then all the things that you thought you knew about your level have changed now, because now you can skip everything just by jumping over stuff. But we don't care. We let it be this way for a very long time, because first of all, the way the mission is scripted allows for that. It allows for, because we don't really look at, there's no triggers, there's no like faking. Like our environment is real. It's a finite environment where you can go all around inside. There's a room, there's an access to it, etc., etc. And we recognize the objectives when they are completed. We don't care how they've been completed. We're not, as long as the target is dead, or as long as the object has been taken or whatever, then the conditions are met. If the player teleported in there, or if they struggle through different combat to reach the area, it doesn't matter. So that's why it's compatible with the future tool, which would allow you to teleport through a wall, for example, and you reach the object and you have it. And then what you do is then at some point, when you know that there is this tool, the gadget of that, then you tune it. You tune it so that it's a little less of a game breaker. If by tuning it you lose some fun, because that's often what happened. It was, man, that was so fun before we nerfed it down. Then you make your level harder with other things, or etc., etc. So it's a constant recheck of reevaluation of what we have, allowing space for new cool ideas to come in and potentially break your game for a while. And sometimes it breaks it until even like after the game shipped. People will realize that that specific level, if you move a few barrels and hop on the rooftop there and do that super cool, crazy double jump that nobody knew you could to reach another rooftop, and then from there drop in the balcony directly and shoot a grenade inside, and that's it, the target's dead, takes 12 seconds, that's okay. Because first of all, not many players are going to do that. The ones who do it are going to feel amazingly good, and that's cool, Yeah. So it provides also for games that are very, highly replayable. It's a trade-off for games that are breakable in a sense. It's like, they're breakable, but like they are. It is because they have so much to offer. So you as a player really get to break it, and you should be happy about it. Hopefully they don't break too easily. Hopefully they don't. It doesn't feel like a bug. It feels more like I'm so smart kind of thing.
With the main premise of Dishonored being you're an assassin and you're going around taking out key targets, it's also quite surprising that you can complete the game without killing anyone, with various gadgets like sleep darts making it easy to take out guards, the inclusion of abilities like blink and bend time to help you slip by them. There's still the big question of how can you deal with the main targets without killing them. There's always multiple ways to lethally take out the targets in Dishonored, whether you use the environment to your advantage or just straight up thrust your blade into them. But how about non-lethally? It adds a whole other level of challenge to the game, but for the dedicated players and the pacifists, the option is there. It'll be up to you to figure out the best way of achieving that. Whether you brand someone's face with a mark that'll make sure they lose all respect and power, or play an incriminating audio log over the loudspeaker, disgracing the target and having them arrested. In a game where many playstyles are already encouraged, Dishonored goes one step further by allowing for this. And depending on your actions throughout the game, the world and outcome slightly alters to fit that.
Most of the writing for those ideas of non-lethal options were Harvey's. So there was a lot of the writing was probably some of the most impactful in this situation, because you want something that feels equally satisfying as killing them. So it has to feel like some sort of really cool poetic justice where, and that's part of the challenge, right? So a lot of it is a writing challenge. From a scripting standpoint, it's mostly offering alternate paths to things, and that is very familiar with the team in general. So we're not afraid of doing things such as you could do this or you could do that. Again, it's about having two objectives that are mutually exclusive. Once you've killed, you can't non-lethally resolve a situation. Once you've non-lethally resolved a situation, you can't kill. That's about the only constraints, is to make sure that those are not mutually exclusive. But it was not specifically, I don't think it was complicated on the technical side, other than a lot of testing. But our games always require a lot of testing.
When it comes down to basics, Dishonored is a game about satisfying, enjoyable combat, fun, fluid movement, an experience which rewards you for experimenting with combinations of abilities and gadgets, and the ability to make you feel like a badass for attempting something out of the ordinary and unexpected, and having it actually pay off. Just like the games before it, and the classics that inspired it, Dishonored puts the control into the player's hands. It's up to you to decide how the events will unfold. Could you describe the atmosphere at Arcane when working on Dishonored? Was everybody very enthusiastic about the project?
Yeah, I mean, Arcane was always a company where people who joined the company knew why they were joining it. It was very rare that someone was just looking for a job. If they come to Arcane, it was because they know the kind of games we do, they're fans of those games, and they want to participate to that. Not all of them were gamers all the time, but at least they would really enjoy something about the games we've done before. So yeah, Dishonored looked like one of those from the get-go. I mean, most of all back then, frankly, when we started in 2009, we were out, as I said before, we're out of that very challenging phase of economical crisis and trying to bounce on by helping other teams. And so doing something that was going to be back right into our alley was, of course, a huge satisfying moment for the entire team.
What is that noise?
Dishonored would go on to be critically praised and consumers loved it. People wanted more of what Dishonored had to offer. The pure creative freedom Dishonored allowed for was incredibly alluring to many people. The game could be experienced in a myriad of different ways. It gave the ability to the player to handle things however they wanted to. It respected the player enough to let them decide how they were going to progress through it. And after all, the intriguing, well-developed city of Dunwall was begging to be expanded on. Did you take a step back when Dishonored 2 was being worked on to work on Prey? Was Harvey the sole director for Dishonored 2?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Harvey physically went to France actually to work with the French team. The first Dishonored was made between the two countries, and And at the end, we had like grown so much on both sides that it felt like it made sense to try the big jump, crazy, silly big jump of making two games at the same time. But we were also separated physically, so it kind of made sense. I would not recommend it when you are in the same studio. Because people start to scavenge each other, etc. But in this case, it really made sense. So Harvey went physically to Lyon, and we branched, basically. We became two teams. As the president of the company, I still had an eye on it, but I was trusting, 1,000,000% Harvey, and worked out. So I guess I was right to trust him. My only participation in Dishonored 2 was some feedback, which might have had some impact left and right, but the same way any consultant would have. And and I did the music for the credits of Dishonored 2. Yeah, the end music. But that's about it. That was my participation.
As much as I would have liked to have his inclusion in this video and to be able to pick his brain about the Dishonored games, unfortunately, Harvey Smith, the director alongside Raphael for Dishonored and the sole director behind Dishonored 2, wasn't able to appear in this video. Perhaps one day we'll get the opportunity to take a deep dive into the development of Dishonored 2 with the insight of Harvey. Just like Dishonored 1, there's bound to be an interesting story to tell there. Raphael would leave Arcane in 2017, a company he set up in 1999 and was the president for 18 years. And over the 18 years he spent at Arcane Studios, he's been involved with some of the most interesting and unique games to come out during that time period. From Arx Fatalis to Dark Messiah of Might and Magic to Dishonored and Prey, Raphael had helped to create something quite special. Since leaving Arcane and working for your own studio, what have you been up to, music-wise, game development-wise?
Leaving Arcane was a hard move. I'm not gonna lie. It was scary. I felt very vulnerable in that time because it started to become something that was really big. That felt big, not in the size, but like in what it represented. And so I left it 18 years, after I started it. And I also needed that from a personal development standpoint. I wanted to reset. I wanted to find my own independence again. Created Weird Wolves, which is the music, the band, with my friend Eva Gore, and we did some of the music. We did some of the music for Mind Game, for Prey. We did some of the music for Dishonored 2. And it was produced by my friend Chose Health. That's his producer name. But anyway, that was very important for my own mental health. I wanted to go back into simplicity, controlling something creatively entirely, without having to worry about a team, without having to worry about money. So the music for me has been that. And then Wolf Eye, which is a bit in the same vein of, it's kind of like starting from scratch again, without having to focus so much on money, what it means to make a game with AAA kind of budgets, which are huge, and also having a little more, not having to worry about being creative or trying new things. And so that was the spirit behind when we created with my friend Julien Roby, who was with Arcane since '99, frankly. He was a producer on Dishonored. He was the producer on Dark Messiah, producer on Arx. It felt like a new game plus. Okay, we start again after having rested because Arcane was intense. I needed some vacation. With all the love that I have for Arcane, I still needed some vacation. I needed to make sure that I still want to make games. And instead of like being trapped in a system where you're not even sure anymore, you're just doing it because you're on a roll. It's like it's what it is now. You're gonna work like a machine, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's how companies work, But at some point, as a human, you have to know how to jump off the train when it's for your own mental health and for what you want to do. You can't be in a system forever without questioning it.
A big thank you to Raphael for taking the time out of his day to assist with the creation of this project. He's been able to be a great insight into the development of Dishonored. If you're interested with what he's involved in now, you can find the links in the description for his band Weird Wolves, as well as the link to his current game company Wolfeye Studios, where they're working on an isometric immersive sim called Weird West. Check it out. Another big thank you to you guys. The reception and support on the videos lately has been nothing short of astonishing. A lot of time and effort goes into the creation of these, and it's amazing to see that the time and effort is being appreciated. That being said, the channel now has a Patreon, so if you're interested in supporting the creation of these documentaries, that's a way you could go about doing that. Benefits include things like getting a personal thank you at the end of every video, along with your name displayed on the screen, and access to videos 12 hours before they go public. I'd like to get community input on how I could best suit these benefits to you guys, where the benefits are actually things people are interested in. So if you'd like to contribute towards this conversation, check out the link for my new Discord server in the description. And also, if you'd like to be involved in other discussions, you can also feel free to join as well. If you'd still like to help out, but you're not interested in spending money on Patreon for whatever reason, that's still absolutely amazing. The best thing you can do is like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share the videos around. You'd be really surprised by how much of an impact those little actions can make towards a video. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.